All right. And welcome to Leader Bubble Podcast, Vlogcast. My name is Kendra Washington Bass, and I am here with the fabulous, the fantabulous Paula Cobb. How are you, Paula?
And well, Kendra, how are you?
I am okay. And this is really a great conversation to kick off um, what is sort of a close of National Principals Month and thinking about the world of education today. I'm so happy to have Paula Cobb. Paula is a retired principal. She doesn't look it. Not a please. Okay. We ain't gonna say what it means for real, but that y'all, this is what retired should look like. But we're so happy to have you. I have been a fan of Paula's since I met her in 2008 and watched her grow as a leader, but also watched the fantastic things she did with two schools, not only transforming the teachers and building capacity of new leaders in the pipeline, but also transforming the lives of families within your respective communities. So I'm so happy to have you here, and I can't wait for us to have this conversation about what you have seen over your span and lifetime as a principal.
Wow. I'm excited to be here. And so it gives me a chance to reflect on things that I probably haven't processed or really even thought about because it all happens so fast. I say the days are long, but the years are short. So it all just kind of went by.
Yeah. Well, here's one of the things that I kind of want you to go back into your journey. And I want you to start from the time you knew you wanted to be a principal. And I asked that question to many people, like, why do you want to be a principal? And I've heard the following: I never wanted to be a principal. Someone tapped me, or I felt like it was maybe the next thing I needed to do because the sort of linearity of the pipeline is your teacher and your AP, your principal, right? There's sort of this more of a vertical alignment of progression, not necessarily horizontal in the space. And others have said, I was the person that needed to be picked at the time because there was no one else. Like, I've heard that. I'm like, goodness gracious. So for you, Paula, why did you want to become a principal? What do you remember?
And I would say that I'm one of those people that I didn't. I was, following my husband's career. I was in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and my principal had gone on leave, and an interim older retired principal had come in, and I was doing just what I thought to do as a young teacher. I was grade chair. I was running a diversity club. I was doing something, we didn't call it STEM then, and just kind of doing the things, doing all the things and teaching. Yeah. And he told me to come by his office one day, and my school happened to be right beside UNC Charlotte. And he said, I have a friend over at UNC Charlotte, and they're just starting their leadership program. And he said, and I think you would be great for the program. And I kind of looked around at me, and he said, yeah. And he said, I gave him your name, go over and talk to him. And I said, talk to him about what? And he said, about getting a master's in leadership. I was like, I'm going to get a master's, but I was going to get a master's in elementary education. He said, well, just go over and talk to him. So I talked to my husband about it, and I went and talked to Dr. Smith. And the next thing I knew, I was getting a master's in leadership and didn't really know, when and how I would be using it. But fast forward, I lived in Charlotte, I moved to Raleigh, and I took some time off, and I came to Gwinnett County Public Schools in 1999. And the principal at the time, I said, listen, I've taught school for 7 years. I have a leadership degree. I don't know the pathway, but if you see leadership in me, help me get to leadership into the principalship. So fast forward, I taught 2 years, and she helped me get into the principalship. And I worked for a principal who, after 6 years of being an assistant principal, said, it's time for you to, do something else. And so it was never in my timing, because I was raising children and my husband was traveling. And so it was people that were saying, it's your time. But it was, so when I finally agreed to it, I was met with a little I don't want to say adversity, but it wasn't easy, which made me say, I'm going to do this. People, I'm not getting the support, or I'm being looked over. And we didn't have a leadership academy, and people were being appointed. And Kendra, about the time you came is when we actually had a pathway. I mean, I asked the superintendent at the time, if you have to have a specialist, if you have to, have so many years, I've done all the things, but
Right.
there's no trajectory. So I don't understand, I don't want this if it's not an equitable way to get to it. And so I will say that I was in the first academy that we had here, and I was actually the first principal named in the academy. So that was the pathway. The answer to that is that it wasn't anything that I sought after, but I think people saw it in me.
Yeah, and I think there's a testament to systems being created so
Yes.
that people are clear about a pathway. So think about what you had experienced without the aspiring principal program, and then what happened when the school district or an education organization creates a very clear pathway where people now know what they need to do, how they're developed, and how they can become an exemplary principal. So you were the first one selected, became a principal in that program. You were in the first cohort.
Yes.
But when you think of yourself then, and you think of yourself, so let's bookend the end of your career. What did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about the role? And what would you say to your younger self in the role now that you know more? That was a loaded question.
It was loaded.
Okay.
Let's just say this. Because I was named at the cohort started in December, I was named in February. So I never got the benefit of a residency or internship. So I didn't get to live life watching another principal do it.
Mhm.
So I went into the school February 1st, on January 31st, I was an AP. February 1st, I was a principal.
Right.
And so without the tools that I needed at the time, you rely on your strengths. So I went in with the strengths that I had as an AP, but an AP is not a principal.
Yep.
And so I went in trying to do all the things, not really being a good delegator. I had 4 assistant principals. I had a school of almost 1,500 students, a staff of 219. And what I needed to know how to be was a master delegate. I was young, several staff members older. And so, I wanted to garner that respect.
Right.
I was very passionate and serious about the work. But I would say I probably did more talking than listening.
Okay.
I went into a school that was in danger of failing. And my predecessor left me in February. She said, her words were, I know that we have no child left behind, and we're not going to make AYP. And that's just how you're going to have to start this. And so the fight and the fear in me was like not under my watch.
Oh.
And so, number one, I would say don't lead from fear. That's a terrible place to lead from. You don't have peace, and you can't see your people. All you can see is the end result of what you want, because there's a lot of pride in that.
Right.
Wanting to do that. And so I would say inherit what you inherit and start small and try to build upon that. You cannot lead with fear. You have got to build those relationships. I didn't do that. I went in trying to get to we made AYP. We made it. But it came at a cost, because I had to start over in August, literally start over and rebuild those relationships. And some of them weren't rebuildable,
Yeah.
a lot had happened. What I needed for somebody to say is, Paula, a lot has been put in, there's not been the things in place that need to be done before you got here. Rome was not built in a day, and it's okay. I just needed for somebody to come and say, get in, get to know the people. The school was 3 years old, so there was no culture. Build culture, build those relationships. Um, you can only do what you can do coming in mid-year. The year's already up and running. So that was my story. And knowing what I know now, um, I would have not taken that person's word, the previous principal's word. I would have had more dialogue and asked more questions, and not tried to have the solution all by myself,
So
because I
that
didn't have.
so that brings me to a secondary question then. So what is it, thinking about your work as a principal over the years, and now thinking about what you do when you coach principals, what is it that gets into a principal's head that he or she or they have to do it all now, that there's this urgency to get it done, and if they don't get it done, it's failed? Where does that come from? Where do you think that comes from?
That everything rises and falls in leadership, and that, when you look up the school, you Google the school, and your name is there as the principal on the school. It's kind of like your baby, and you want your baby to make all the developmental steps and and you feel like it's such a reflection of you as a person, and so, um, especially if it's a school in close to failing, you feel like it does seem like a sense of urgency. If nobody tells you if nobody comes to you, if the superintendent, assistant superintendent don't sit you down and say, listen, we know the current situation of the school. We're going to give you some tools and some supports. And none of that was said back then, like, tools and supports to put in place. I felt like it was all on my shoulders. And so if nobody tells you, and you don't have another paradigm to build from, you feel like it's all on you. I don't know if you feel like you're going to lose your job or anything, but you certainly don't want to fail.
So how do you mitigate that? So you were talking about, back then. Do you see that happening still though?
This is the place where I have to interject COVID, because I think that may have changed some things. I think, we went through the whole target school status thing, and that still would instill fear in principals, when the list would come out and where were you? And so, since we are talking about being equitable and having empathy and different things now, empathy was not a word in 2008. That was not a word. And so, as we're talking about these things, we're still now, as we're coming back into that accountability age, we're not saying target schools or focus schools. We're saying these are schools that need more support, and they're going to need more resources in order to be successful. We're not penalizing you for this, but we just see, based on the data, that you need more help and you need some support. So that's what we're going to do. That's the verbiage now, rather than the verbiage back then. You are a target school. You are at the bottom of this list, and this, the language is different.
Yeah, yeah. And do you think that principals are interpreting it differently, or are they saying, "Oh, language is different, but you really mean this," right? It really is accountability. It really is a list when you say, "I need support." Are they seeing it as really real support? And if so, what has changed at the district level for principals where they're receiving support that's benefiting not only their development, but in service to kids, if that's the case?
Receiving the support and service to kids. I don't know if the support is there for their personal development, but
Okay.
not veteran principals. I will
Okay.
say that in my district, and I know we're going to talk about that in a minute, but there is that support for new principals. But for a veteran principal, they have to know how to make a paradigm shift too when the results are not, you can't do what you've always done. And I'm going to school tomorrow just so somebody can process out loud to me their 45-day review and their data and kind of to talk through that. Well, veteran principals need that too. Just somebody to really listen in a way to help them come to their own solutions and answers as to what they need to do for the school. But oftentimes, veteran principals are still in a place, oftentimes, assistant principals, they still don't have the space to process and reflect on what really is best for their school, or even time to sit down with stakeholders who can unpack, what happened last year, what happened with this data, what happened with this cohort of children. So they need that. So yeah, you can bring me some coaches and you can bring me people who are going to come in that don't really know my children, but give me some resources to help. I need help processing out where to start and where to go with this so that my children can be successful.
So let's talk about the veteran principal. And we mean this like someone who has more than 5 to 7 years at their current school. They've impacted their schools in a way that you're seeing some trends and positive results. So when I'm talking about a veteran, I'm talking about someone whose practices can be replicated. I'm not just talking about years of experience here. So when I'm talking about veteran, I'm talking about veteran experience, has a level of expertise that people want to emulate and replicate. Mm-hmm. And that's you, right? That's who you were as I knew you. What did you need? What did you feel like you needed as a veteran principal to keep your craft relevant, to process the way that you described what you think some veteran principals might need? Talk about you specifically. What did you need? And then how did you find it?
I tried to read as often as I could, but we did so much professional development in our own district, but we can be insulated a little bit to where it's just Gwinnett. What I really would have loved and never made the time and space for was just go somewhere else and go to other trainings outside of the district. Like, I didn't pour that into myself. And so I wish and nobody told me I couldn't,
right?
That it didn't align with the work. Nobody told me I couldn't. And I think some principals do that better than I did it, because I just never thought that I needed to invest in my own learning. I went to the district sent me to the Teachers Academy, and a lot of principals again, it goes to the equity piece. You often felt like the same principals were being chosen over and over and over again to go to the Wallace Foundation, to go do different things. And so what I should have done is advocated for myself sometimes and say, I didn't advocate for myself. I was like, well, that's who they choose. That's who they want to go. But I think there has to be that level of advocacy. And I'm not one to, get in the way. It's like they must be choosing these people for a reason. But what can happen, and what I would tell veteran principals, don't let yourself become invisible. You're over here, you're doing all the right things, you're working hard, you're building relationships, you're keeping everybody whole, you're doing, but what happens is you begin to lose your own passion because you're not restoring yourself. Nobody is coming and saying, Paula, great job, or Paula, I was thinking about your school and some of the things that might be good. Why don't you go to this workshop and let me sing you here. It was never, and it's not. We're a big system, right? And so I guess to keep things equitable, we have to do internal professional development. But I've been doing internal professional development for 15, 16 years. I will say, and I have to bring this up, some of the most uplifting professional development that I did have, or that inspired me in years 10, 11, and 12 was the SAMS training. And what that was just helping me manage my time in a way that I could truly be an instructional leader. And that inspired me and it kept me uplifted. And I'll tell you, as an educational professional, I would leave those professional learnings and feeling like a professional, appreciated, loved on. Um, so that helped me and inspired me. And we have to be cognizant of that. And I would tell any veteran principal, don't go invisible. Advocate for yourself for what you need.
Yeah, I mean, it's more for building that community, right? That the community is so large. I mean, we think about the number of school districts across the United States, those large ones, like the large 12, right? New York City being the largest, and in the school district in which you are serving is the 12th largest. But the majority of school districts are mid-size. And so some may have the internal capacity to do and share the resources that you are afforded, and some do not, right? Those resources, they have to come up with more creative ways to create that. And part of my work is to help build this community of thought people, to be able to give the opportunity for principals and leaders to process, to talk, to share, to hone their craft, to be loved on, as you just described, to maybe have intervisitations and meet up, as cohorts of leaders walking a building and sharing practices that could potentially be replicated, right? Or just even to ask a principal, how and why did you do what you did? Why that, right? It may not be best for my school, but I'm curious about your thought process, what you went through that made that decision. Maybe I need to be thinking about the way that I make decisions differently by listening to someone. And when do you ever get a chance to be able to sit down and slow down to listen? So it's great to hear you talk about, what was missing and the advice to give to those who are veterans to not be invisible. Like, there is so much value that veteran principals have that sometimes we forget in education, that the answer is in the room, right? And sometimes you kind of have to pull that person back into the fold, but it also is incumbent upon the individual to advocate. So I love the word that you use, advocate for yourself.
Yes.
So let's look at the current state. You have retired. Congratulations on a really, I would say, a storied career, right? In the district where you spent a majority of your leadership time. Now you have the opportunity to give back to new leaders and support veteran leaders as well as a leadership coach. Can you share, what are you seeing as some of the differences in what leaders are experiencing now than maybe when you started or even during parts of your career? What are those challenges that they're facing that we just need to know? And how are you helping them?
I will say, when I was coming through, staffing was not always an issue. Getting qualified, just great qualified teachers. Our recruitment efforts were there, and I did have teachers come from different states and out of the country. But we're in a crisis with teacher quality and teacher retention. And so, I've had some of my new principals say, like, they were working at Starbucks yesterday and they're in my classrooms today, and not to be facetious, but just teacher quality and, making sure that you're getting good quality teachers. That is harder now. That really is. And so I see that as a challenge, because when you have someone who doesn't have that pedagogy and behavior training, it creates a situation in a classroom that's just hard for everybody. And then I think principals are trying to give the support and provide the support, but it's not a matter of will. It's just a matter of skill and building that capacity. So, I would say that is one thing. And then another thing is that when I first started, it's been so long ago that we didn't even have instructional calendars, anything like that. So that part is better. The structures are better. The things that are in place are better. And I sat in a meeting today where principals are very encouraged about teaching literacy. They are very encouraged about the resources and supports that we have in our particular district, because it is a resource-rich district. Now, sometimes the challenge we have is choosing, how many of the resources are we going to use? But I would say, out of everything and out of everybody that I'm talking to, what every school is struggling with is mitigating behaviors that are an overflow from COVID. That is a lot of time and energy at a lot of schools, not all of them, but special education has taken on a life of its own. And if you're a principal that does not have that special ed background, trying to figure out how best to support those students on that end of the spectrum that need a lot of support. So that takes a lot of time and effort. But I would say getting good people right now, and just dealing with students that have some very new and unique behaviors post-COVID, and trying to figure that out. And so that's what I'm saying that might have been a little different from, my time in the city.
So coming to the end, what would be advice you would give to those who are thinking about becoming principals now, right? So let's make it personal. Let's say that one of your daughters decided to make a career change and she wanted to go into education and potentially become a school leader. What would you say about the work? How would you coach her in thinking about that journey?
Not being biased, but I think both of them would be great educators. I really do. But they've seen it from a distance and they hadn't seen it up. Because one thing about the principalship is it magnifies everything that you are. So if you're impatient, you'll be more impatient if you don't check that at the door. And you have to be prepared for the fact that it can be lonely. You have to, there are things with your assistant principals and your teachers and your support staff. They're just decisions and things that it doesn't have to be lonely, but it can be lonely. You have to constantly be learning in order to be prepared for a changing demographic within your schools. That's another thing. The demographics are changing rapidly. You have to have leadership that is going to be prepared and ready for that diversity. And if it were my children, I would just say you have got to be prepared to deal with all different kinds of human beings, young, old, different backgrounds, and it is about, as I read the other day, head work, like knowing what you're supposed to do, but it is about heart work too. It's about the heart, and this is work unlike corporate America and other things you can't just do in your head. You have to love people, you have to love children, and so on your toughest days, you'll know your why, and you will know that you're making an impact. I was happy, when I retired, I was able to walk away from my career knowing that I had impacted and changed lives, that I had, whether it was the teachers in the building or the children that I have been with, and, I had a lot of messages, and you don't know your impact always. I'm glad I've been able to live and be around, to get DMs on Facebook or somebody running to me at the store, because you're always in motion and you're always moving. But it is my hope that intelligent people with great social intelligence and a great love of children and people will choose to go into education and lead schools. Everything rises and falls on the leadership at these schools, and we need people who really, really have some unique skills to be our leaders in our schools, because they're complex. They are complex places, and it takes very skilled people to run them. And And I don't want to sit here and say I was the most skilled person, but I had a heart for it. And having that heart made me learn the things that I needed to know to do the absolute best that I could do in my time as a school leader.
Well, Paula Cobb, thank you for your time as a school leader. Thank
Thank
you
you,
for the
Kendra.
nuggets. You shared some really poignant points that I hope that those who are considering this work, those who are in it, like really pushing through, are inspired that you're not alone, that this work is truly hard work, and you also have to have the head work in order
Yeah.
to make sure that you build the capacity of the teachers. I think one of the things you
Yes.
said, it's a current challenge is, finding quality people. I think the
Yes.
nuance right now is principals have to step up their games in
Mm.
terms of teaching teachers.
Yes.
So the new hat is principal teacher, which used to be the old hat. It was the original hat.
Mm-hmm.
So now you have to take the stance of principal teacher, which also means that districts are going to have to find out ways to mitigate some of the organizational management pieces so that the principal can continue to teach as
Yes.
they build this new crop. And it makes the position of an educator more desirable when you know you're coming into a warm place, you're being developed. Current
Yes.
generation of workers are expecting their bosses to develop them. It's more about the conditions of work than it is about pay.
Yes. It
People are
is.
looking for, am I going to find my purpose in this environment? Can I feel fulfilled in this environment?
Yes.
And they will
Yes.
stay in environments where they feel fulfilled. I think people have made a decision after COVID, and
Yes.
Gallup organization has said, it's like they now know what was valued, how people were valued during COVID. And that led people to say, I'm not going back to that work environment. It
No.
did not value my health, my
Yes.
being,
Yes.
what I did on a daily basis. And unfortunately, education and schools were not immune to that. So you had some teachers who say, I'm not going back to that building. They may go back into education, or I'm not going back to that district, or I am done with education.
Yes.
And now we
That.
have to change the way the environments look and feel. And again, you said everything rises and falls on leadership. And I would say all the way to the top, to the superintendent creating the conditions where people's purpose of what they're doing. Like, you remember, I want to be in education. I want to change the world. I want to
Yes.
change minds of children, right? I want to have
Yes.
this impact. Like, it's almost, we have to be reminded that that still exists. And are we attending to that deep soul purpose that people will go into a profession that we know we don't make enough money, we don't have enough hours, but we stay because we love it.
We love it. And to what you said, Kendra, I will say our younger teachers, they do want work-life balance
Yes.
and conditions. They will say that out loud. Like they're advocating for themselves and they're advocating for themselves. And they just, that loyalty that our generation had, they will bounce.
There's a different generation of work, right? So the baby boomers were loyalists. They stayed all the way. Your millennials, not so much. They're looking for professional development. They're looking for clear path to higher positions within the organization.
Yes.
They're looking for the balance, right? So the upcoming generation, and I don't even know what the name of this new generation is being called, but they're definitely looking at the health. They're looking at their parents and grandparents who are dying young, who have retired one year and they're gone the next, who are experiencing health challenges at a much younger age due to stress. Right? Due to stress, doing long hours, lack of sleep, bad health, eating habits. It's caught up with us, right? So our children, our grandchildren are like, I don't want to emulate that. And they shouldn't, right?
No.
That's the lesson they should learn from the legacy that we are leaving, is to advocate. And you're right, they are advocating for themselves. So
They are.
Yeah. Paula, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation. And I'm so looking forward to how people respond to your nuggets of genius.
Hope it helped. Bye.
It definitely will. Thank you.
Thank you.